أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ثم أتبع سببا حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا قالوا يا ذا القرنين إن يأجوج ومأجوج مفسدون في الأرض فهل نجعل لك خرجا على أن تجعل بيننا وبينهم سدا قال ما مكني فيه ربي خير فأعينوني بقوة أجعل بينكم وبينهم ردما آتوني زبر الحديد حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين قال انفخوه حتى إذا جعله نارا قال آتوني أفرغ عليه قطرا فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه وما استطاعوا له نقبا قال هذا رحمة من ربي فإذا جاء وعد ربي جعله دكا وكان وعد ربي حقا صدق الله العظيم. Yesterday we began the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is the final story in Surah Kahf, and we learned about two of his travels, one towards the west and the other one towards the east. In this section that I just read, we're going to hear about another travel. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. Then he traveled on a course. Modern historians, Islamic historians, have tried to pinpoint where he went. Some said like between the Caspian and Dead Sea, between there, in Dagestan area. Then Kazakhstan is more to the right of the Caspian Sea. So in that general area, that's a whole mountainous region also. Some have claimed to have found the wall, which we're going to talk about later on, right? So he took but we will see from the end and the moral to learn, or the lesson to learn from the story, that to pinpoint these things are not really necessary, right? The best thing is that ma abhim ma abham Allah. Whatever Allah has left ambiguous, keep it ambiguous. Just leave it as it is, right? Because there's no real benefit in really finding out where it is and what it is, and right, as we will learn when we learn the actual lesson to learn from the story. So he says he traveled on another course. حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما, until he reached between two mountains, and he found in front of them a people, لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, who could hardly understand his speech. Why this is mentioned? This is to show that how primitive these people were, or how disconnected from the other civilizations they were. They were so far and distant out and away from other societies and civilizations that they had their own language, right? And they could not understand when Dhul Qarnayn spoke to them, right? Because they were a far off community in the mountains somewhere. So لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, that they could hardly understand what he was saying. This word kad, when it comes before a verb, it usually implements that the verb was nearly not achieved, right? فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. That comes in Surah Baqarah with relation to the Banu Israel when they were told to sacrifice this cow. So it said, فَذَبَحُوهَا, they sacrificed it, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ, but it seemed like they were not going to. So kada, this comes before a verb, it usually gives that type of meaning, that لا يكادون يفقهون, it seemed like they were not going to understand what he was saying. But somehow, through sign language, this and that, they were able to communicate. And that communication Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions from here. Qalu, they said, meaning the people that Dhul Qarnayn met, Ya Dhul Qarnayn, O Dhul Qarnayn, Inna Ya'juja wa Ma'juja mufsiduna fil ard. That Ya'juj and Ma'juj are spreading corruption in the land. فَهَلْ نَجْعَلُ لَكَ خَرَجًا عَلَىٰ أَن تَجْعَلَ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَهُمْ سَدًّا. So can we assign for you a tribute or a monetary fund, right? Provided that you make between us and them a saddan, a barrier. So these people, through their sign language and their broken whatever language Dhul Qarnayn spoke, they spoke to him somehow and related to him that there are these two tribes beyond the mountains. Their names are Ya'juj is one tribe, Ma'juj is another tribe. I'm not going into all the tafsir about them today, right? That's not the discussion here today, right? That discussion will come in Surah Anbiya. Hatta idha futihat Ya'juj wa Ma'juj wa hum min kulli hadabin yansilun. We'll talk about that there. So these are two tribes, right? And they're human beings. They're from Bani Adam, right? And they're from the children of Yafith. When the flood of Noah alayhi salam, when the world was re-inhabited, they're from that line. The same line as the Turks, right? They're all like cousins. So Ya'juj and Ma'juj, they say they come from the mountains, from over the mountain, right? Or from between the mountain, because he reached between two mountains. They come from between the mountains and they come here and they cause chaos. They loot us, they kill us, they rob us, and then they go back. And they continuously do this. They come, they go, they loot, they take what they got to take. They probably survive on it for a while, then they come again. So they saw Dhul Qarnayn, they saw his army, they looked at him from whatever conversation they had with him. They saw that he seems to be a person who we can ask for a little assistance from. So they offered to pay him to, right? They said, فَهَلْ نَجْعَلُ لَكَ خَرَجًا. Can we assign to you a tribute, meaning a kharaj, some money which we will take out of our budget. We will assign it for you, we'll pay you on condition or provided that you build this barrier between us and them. So Dhul Qarnayn says, قَالَ مَا مَكَّنِّي فِيهِ رَبِّي خَيْرٌ. He said that whatever provisions my Rabb has established me in, khayrun, is better. Meaning whatever you're going to offer me, the provisions I have are way better. I have enough provisions of my own. I don't need any payment or for you to pay me for this job. I have all the provisions that I need already. As we heard yesterday, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the thing, and at the beginning, that we had established him in the land, right? So Dhul Qarnayn had all the provisions necessary, all the wealth, all the necessary knowledge, all of that Dhul Qarnayn had. So he told them straight, whatever provisions I'm establishing, they are better than what you can offer me anyhow. فَأَعِينُونِي بِقُوَّةٍ. So help me with some strength, meaning with manpower. أَجْعَلْ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُمْ رَدْمًا. I will make between you and them a barrier. Okay? The first word for barrier came as saddan. Now the second word for barrier came here is radman. Okay? We're not going to get into all the details of what the words are derived from and this and that, because there's no one here to understand all of that. But saddan is a barrier of an inferior type, and radman is a barrier of a better type. It's like I asked Brother Hanzallah here, I got a metal bucket here that got a little hole in it. You got a little flash band to put on it for me or what? And Brother Hanzallah said, flash band what? I got a torch on here, man. And he torched it up for me, right? And patch it properly. So it's like they asked for a sad, right? Which is an inferior barrier, but they got a radam, which is something much better, right? So It's like they asked for what they could understand might solve the problem, but Dhul Qarnayn, being the just and very helpful king he was, and the person of experience, gave them something better than what they asked for. Okay? So he starts the construction. Atuni Zubar al-Hadid. He tells them, bring to me blocks of iron, okay, or pieces of iron. Some have translated Zubar as blocks, some have translated as sheets, but the Mufassirin write Qita'un, which means pieces. Okay, so whether those pieces were blocks or sheets, whatever they were pieces of iron. So he told them, bring me pieces of iron. حتى إذا ساوى بين الصدفين قال انفخوا, until when he filled the gap between the two mountains. The mountains were referred as Saddain also before. Now they're referred as Sadafain. Right? You know all these little technicalities in these ayat. So he says, until he filled the gap between the two mountains, then he said, قال انفخوا. Then he said what? To blow. Because he was starting a fire, right? So first he filled the gap between the two mountains. So the reason for mentioning Sadafain here means the word Sadaf in Arabic, or Sadafain in Arabic, means two mountains which are like attached, same in height, and they're very close to one another. Right? I think closest to imagination, I never seen them in person up close, but probably the Pitons in St. Lucia, how they just next to one another, same in height, same in solidity and in mass and everything. They're two mountains very closely attached to one another, but there's a small gap between the two, right? So that's what Sadafain refers. So they're not like mountains, one over there, some in St. Lucia, one here in St. Michael. There were two mountains very close to one another, very similar in size, and closely attached with a small path between the two, right? So he says that when he filled whatever gap was there, where Ya'juj and Ma'juj were coming through all the time, after he filled it with iron, he said, قَالَ انفخوا, he said, blow. حَتَّى إِذَا جَعَلَهُ نَارًا, until he made it, nar really means fire. Translators have translated as it until it became red hot. So somehow he lit it on fire so that the blocks would probably melt into one another to a point and start to solidify. Okay? So he started this fire to get all these separated blocks now to sort of melt and bind into one another. Then he said, قَالَ آتُونِي أُفْرِغْ عَلَيْهِ قِطْرًا. Then he said, bring me some molten copper that I can pour upon it. So pouring copper upon the metal or the iron wall now will smooth it out. Right? It will give it a smooth finish. Meaning if someone tries to climb, they're going to slide right back down. Right? They won't be able to scale it easily. So here is like Dhul Qarnayn has supervised the whole construction of this barrier, of this wall, of this dam, whatever you want to call it. And he has shown them. As you can see here, they have all the resources too. But they didn't have the knowledge as how to construct this barrier. So he helps them out, probably with his army as well, as long as they themselves. He didn't just give them everything on a silver plate either. He made them get involved in the construction. Right? As you can see, he's giving the orders, bring this, bring that, do this, do that. So they are doing the work. And he's giving all the instructions, he's supervising. So he's the foreman on the job. Right? And he's giving out all the instructions and making sure the job is done properly. Okay? Then he says, فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَن يَظْهَرُوهُ وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا. So they won't be able to scale over it. The word able here comes with فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا. And then the second one, and وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا. And they won't be able to tunnel through it. So in English we just say able. Okay? Scaling a wall requires less effort than tunneling a wall, right? So to differentiate between the two efforts, Allah uses one word as famasta'u, and then he used the other word, وَمَسْتَطَاعُوا. So they won't be able to scale it with a lesser effort, nor they won't be able to tunnel through it with a harder effort. Okay? So he described the wall and why he has made it such, so that neither they can scale it or neither they can tunnel through it. قَالَ هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي. Then he associates all that he has done here to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, and this is from the mercy of my Lord, my Rabb. So it shows here that he's a believer. He believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا. These sentences show that he's a believer, and he's a believer in Islam. Because he says here, فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي, that when the promise of my Rabb comes, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا, he will level it to the ground. Right? Dakka, that means when you level something straight to the ground. The Arabs have a saying with regards to camels, nakatun dakka. When there's a camel without a hump, they call it nakatun dakka, a camel with a straight back. So he's saying that when the promise of my Rabb comes, even this wall will be reduced to rubble. It will be flattened. Okay, so these words here, قَالَ هَذَا رَحْمَةٌ مِّن رَبِّي فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا. These implement and show to us that Dhul Qarnayn was a believer in Islam. He believed in the Day of Judgment. He believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He believed the bounties he had from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he also emphasizes and says, وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي حَقًّا. And the promise of my Rabb is true. It will happen. And one day this wall will have to come crumbling down again, no matter how solid I've made it. Okay, so this was his final travel. So from this, a few points I implemented yesterday, that he was a kind king, when he conquered towards the west and when he conquered toward the east, it wasn't just that he just traveled to the west for traveling's sake to see where the sunset is, and he went to the east to see where the sunrise. You know what I mean? He didn't just travel for no reason. He was traveling and conquering, gathering resources, conquering, and he was conquering tribe after tribe, people after people, nation after nation, so there was nothing left to conquer, right? So in all of his conquering, as he conquered, he established people, right? He helped societies rebuild. He helped people progress. As we can see in this last travel, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in detail how he helped these people to form a defense system against Ya'juj and Ma'juj, who were constantly looting and plundering them. So he helped nations as he went along. He didn't just conquer people and, you can say like how the Mongols used to do, and just decimate and ruin their society and move on. No, he was conquering and establishing societies, helping people build, right? Solving problems on the way, right? And making a better tomorrow for others, as we can see from this last section of his story, where he helped out this tribe, who were a very primitive tribe, right? As we can see from this, the language was not the same. They were so cut off from the regular society that when Zulkarnain spoke, they couldn't understand him. Number two, they didn't have any knowledge, although they had resources. They have no knowledge on how to construct and how to build. So they were like a primitive people, and Zulkarnain helped them to progress and how to solve a problem they had. Okay? So now we reach the end of the story of Zulkarnain, and we have to ponder on the lessons to learn from this story. Okay? So before we get into the lesson of this story itself, let's just go back a bit to the beginning, where from the start of this surah, we had established that in this surah, the theme of it is faith and versus materialism, right? This has been the constant theme throughout the surah. Faith, the battle of faith and materialism, the battle of faith and materialism. We've seen in the first story the ugly face of the materialist who could not accept people who wanted to live their lives according to a different faith than his. So he, you know what I mean? He forced those young gentlemen to leave society and go and seek protection in a cave. So we saw that side of the materialist. In the second story, we saw another materialist who, because of his worldly possessions, had disrespect for the poor, okay, and who was quite proud and arrogant of himself. So we saw that side of a materialist again. In the third story, there were no materialists, but there was an illustration of materialistic thought. Like today, where the thought is, if I cannot comprehend, or my intellect or my mind can't wrap around something, well, it's not worth believing, right? That was illustrated in the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. That the materialists, they deny everything that can't be comprehended fully by human intellect. But that was illustrated in the story. There was no materialist there. So from these stories, when we continue seeing this combat of materialism, right, and faith, a person might think that Islam is against materialistic progress, right? That might come into our minds probably, that Islam probably is demanding from us, head down East Coast and live in the huts and live a primitive life, right? Maybe that's what Islam wants from us, because we were hearing this combat with materialism throughout the whole surah. So after all of this combat with materialism, right, there's a lesson here to learn, that a materialistic development, these are two different things, right? Materialistic development, this is always encouraged in Islam. Islam did not teach us to be a primitive society. In fact, it encouraged us to develop with the times, right? And develop as much as we can, and to be as powerful as a nation as we could be. This is what Islam teaches us to be, right? So maybe that thought could come in our minds, okay, that Islam opposes materialistic development. But if we study the words of this last section, or this story of Dhul Qarnayn, we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna makkanna lahu fil ardi wa ataynahu min kulli shay'in sababa. That we had established for Dhul Qarnayn in the land, and we had given him means of all types. Meaning, he was materialistically solid. He had the financial power, he had the military power, he had the, the educational power, meaning wherever, I didn't mention it about him, but wherever he went, he could speak the languages of the people. So he had that power. And he also had power over people. He had real power, right? He was a king. So he had all the materialistic means anybody could ask for, right? And that's why he was such a successful conqueror. All right? Number two, Allah, as we said here today, he himself said, Dhul Qarnayn, قَالَ مَا مَكَّنِّي فِيهِ رَبِّي خَيْرٌ. Whatever means or whatever provisions my Lord has put me in is much better than whatever you guys could offer me. Whatever little money they were going to offer him to build this wall, he said, I don't need it. Right? I'll do it for you. You want me for a sud? You want me for flashbang? I giving you torch on, right? I giving you it, and I giving it for free, right? I don't need your provisions. What the provisions I have are more than enough. So we can see here that Dhul Qarnayn had no shortage of materials. Okay? He was a person who had all types of materials in every avenue also. Not just wealth, right? He had wealth, he had manpower, he had rulership, he had everything. Okay? So from this we can see that a person being or having abundance of material is not a criteria or the measuring stick to where you can say he's a materialist. Okay, we can see this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here now is showing us how to differentiate between the materialist, right, and the ones who are not materialists. And as we can see here, just having materials is not the measuring stick, or else there will be no bigger materialist than Na'udhu Billah Dhul Qarnayn, because he had everything, right? He had as I said, he had the manpower, he had the finance, he had the rulership, he had everything possible. Okay? But it is necessary that we know how to distinguish materialists from non-materialists, because the climax of materialism will come with the advent of Dajjal, right? And as we said, this story is to serve as a protection from the fitan of Dajjal. And before Dajjal comes, there will be people paving this road for Dajjal. He's not just going to turn up one day and introduce materialism. Materialism will be introduced over a time until it reaches its climax, which will be the Dajjal himself, right? He will be the climax, he will be the pinnacle of materialism. So we need to understand how to distinguish between the materialist and the materialist system and the non-materialist system. Okay, and just having materials, this is not the measuring stick, as we can see from the story. So we have to now look in carefully what were the characteristics of Dhul Qarnayn. First, as we heard today, he was a mu'min. He had one, Iman. Number two, with Iman he had Amal, good Amal. As we can see, he helped these people construct, even in his conquering of the West and the East. It was his criteria, right? Man amila salihan, those who come on to the right path, he will be lenient with them. And those who want to oppose the right path, well, he will wage war against those type of people. So we can see that he had good amal in his life, and he promoted good actions as well. Okay? And he also opposed kufr, as we heard yesterday, right? I'm looking for the ayat here. قَالَ أَمَّا مَنْ ظَلَمَ فَسَوْفَ نُعَذِّبُهُ. And the ones who continue to do wrong, or the ones who do wrong, meaning stay on kufr and don't want to accept Islam, فَسَوْفَ نُعَذِّبُهُ, I will soon punish them, meaning I will wage war against them, I will wipe them out. Okay? So he opposed kufr. So one, he had iman. Two, he had good actions. He promoted good actions, and he opposed kufr. Okay? And he was kind. He showed kindness to humanity, because he says here, وَسَنَقُولُ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا. And those who come on to the right path, we will designate to them ease in our commands towards them. So he was kind towards humanity, and he used to assist humanity, and assist in a way with no strings attached. Even if humanity offered him, right, for his services, he never took those offers. So these are the characteristics of people with power who are not materialist. Okay, those who may have materials, may have the power, but if they're not a materialist, they will have these qualities in them. Okay, they will have iman, they will have good actions, they will promote good actions, they will oppose kufr and the actions of kufr, they will show kindness to humanity, and they will assist humanity without strings attached. If we find a person drenched in materials with these qualities, then you can't really say that this man is a materialist. Okay? But now, if we look at the characteristics of systems today and nations today, do we see nations in iman or kufr? Right? The nations today and the people in power today who hold the reins of power, right? Do they have iman or are they in kufr? I'm not going to call names, everybody can judge. Are their actions according to good morals? We don't even have to go to A'mal Salihah, right? Because they're not Muslims, but do they promote morality or immorality? Think about it. Okay? Do they promote Iman and good actions, or do they promote kufr and bad actions? Right? Are they kind to humanity, or do they just destroy humanity? Okay? And if they do offer any assistance to humanity, do they do it without strings attached, or are they strings attached? Huh? So we can clearly see who are paving the path for Dajjal by learning the lessons of this surah, or of this section of this story of Dhul Qarnayn. So that's why this is helpful to distinguish, right? And will be helpful to distinguish who the Dajjal is and who the supporter of Dajjal is. Because when Dajjal arrives, he will have kufr written on his forehead. He will be a promoter of kufr. He will oppose Allah's godliness. Right? He will oppose Allah's rububiyyat and Allah's godliness. So he will be a promoter of kufr. Okay? He will promise you, or you can say, assistance. And he will promise you riches. But in turn, it will be no riches. It will be just a deception. Right? We hear that hadith. He will throw one person into the fire of hell, but it will actually be Jannah. And he will throw people into what may appear to be a fire, but it will be a garden of peace. So he will come with deception. And those systems and those people before him who will pave the path for him will have those same characteristics. They will have kufr, they will promote the amal of kufr and the actions of kufr. They will come to you with deception. They will come to you that we're going to develop your country for you, and we're going to help you out. But they will have other motives, and if they even help you, they're going to do it with strings attached. And we can judge all the powerful nations of today and see which ones fall on the characteristics of Dhul Qarnayn and which one fall on the characteristics of Dajjal. So it'll be very easy for a mu'min who reads this surah and reads this section of the surah to distinguish which side of the fence he should be on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to understand. Subhanallah bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.